Hello everyone, Ashton here from iCanMed, and in this video we are going to go through quantitative reasoning and strategies on how to successfully master it. Now, quantitative reasoning is a fancy way of just saying mathematics. And what type of mathematics is it? It's normally year 8 or year 9 worded mathematics problem. So for some people who really enjoy mathematics and are very good at it, you'll find that quantitative reasoning is on the easier side compared to the other sections. And for other people, you might find this section a nightmare, especially if you're the type that says, oh, I really hate mathematics, it's really tough, and I just don't know how to improve in this question type. Now, it doesn't matter which group you belong in, because I'm sure with our strategies today, you will be able to successfully complete quantitative reasoning in a way that will improve whatever level you are on at the moment. Okay, so let's take a look at quantitative reasoning. Now, before we start to look at this question that you guys have seen at home, we're going to go through a little bit of basics in what type of questions you'll actually get and what topics of mathematics will be in the actual exam. Now, you need to be very, very familiar with these following topics: percentages, fractions, decimals, rates, and ratios. Okay, these 5 topics consisted of more than 90% of quantitative reasoning questions in last year's UCAT. So we expect this trend to continue into future years. So you have to really be on top of your mathematics for those topics. And remember I said a mathematics level is going to be around year 8 and year 9. So that's the beginning of high school. Okay, so I'll repeat those topics again. It is percentages, decimals, fractions, rates, and ratios. So what is required is a basic understanding of those mathematics concepts at a year 8 and year 9 level. So if you're weak in those topics of mathematics, it's highly recommended that you actually pick up a year 8 and year 9 textbook and work through those mathematics questions to the point where you can do the worded problem-solving questions in your year 8 and year 9 textbook. Okay, now if you're looking for a mathematics textbook in year 8 and year 9, we do highly recommend the Pearson 8 and Pearson 9 mathematics textbooks because Pearsons are the people that write the UCAT. So their worded mathematics questions are often quite similar to the ones in the UCAT. However, there are, of course, some differences from year 8 and year 9 mathematics questions with the UCAT mathematics questions, and we'll go through them shortly. But remember, you need to be very familiar with those topics to the point where if you were to sit a maths test in those topics, you would be able to score an A and pretty much get all the questions correct at a year 8 and year 9 level. So please go and get familiar with those topics before you do any quantitative reasoning questions, because if you can't do the maths, okay, then there's no way that you'll be able to perfect your quantitative reasoning techniques. Okay, so let's jump straight into this question that we have in front of us. Now, as you can see here, this is a standard quantitative reasoning question. Okay, there's a premise at the top, and sometimes there's a diagram, sometimes there's no diagram. And here we have 5 multiple choice answers. Okay, normally in other sections, it's only 4 multiple choice answers, or sometimes there's even only 3 multiple choice answers. Okay, but UCAT has recognized that this section is probably the most familiar out of all the sections in the UCAT with what you have experienced in the past. It's just the year 8, year 9 mathematics problem solving. So that's why they've tried to make it a bit harder to guess the correct answer by adding some extra questions or extra answer options so that it's harder to just guess the correct answer. Okay, now in this section, you'll notice that sometimes you'll only have one question per premise, and other times you might have multiple questions per premise. Now here, this is a one question per premise question. So when I go through this, there are certain things you have to take note of before you do the question. Okay, now there's 40 seconds for every single question in quantitative reasoning. Okay, so here you have 40 seconds to read all that and then read the question, then answer it. Okay, now I want you to just not really think about time at the beginning of preparation. Okay, because some people think, oh yeah, I've got 40 seconds, then you do the question and you do it in like 39 seconds and you feel happy with yourself. But actually, sometimes a question only takes 10 or 20 seconds to do. Okay, quantitative reasoning is one of the more time-lenient question types in all of UCAT. Okay, so we have the most 100% in this section of the UCAT. Okay, but there are still some people that really struggle with quantitative reasoning. Okay, and they struggle to finish on time because they struggle to understand the information that's presented, and they struggle to find the answer because they do not know what information they have and they do not know what answer they are trying to look for. Okay, so what are some techniques that is used? Now, if you take a look at the first sentence, you always read the premise before you read the actual question. This is very similar to verbal reasoning, where you are aiming to understand the information given to you before you go to the question. Okay, now a reason for that is because sometimes there is multiple questions per premise. So you do not want to be reading the question first and then realizing you have no idea what the question means because you don't know the context that the question is asking you about. So then you end up reading the premise and then you read the question again because you forgot what it was asking for the first time you read it. So it's very important that you should focus on only reading through everything just once in order to find the answer. And that is also the quickest way you can actually do this question. Okay, if you find that you're reading through something multiple times, that is a very severe mistake. Okay, so if you had to read something like the whole premise twice instead of once, okay, that's double the time it takes compared to someone else who only needs to read through the premise once in order to do the question. And of course, you are going to run out of time. Okay, so you always have to bring in the mindset that you can only read through the premise once, and you treat reading the premise more than once as a mistake. Okay, so that's a very important mindset to have. So the first time that you read through something, you have to always pick out the key important words, okay, that tell you how to solve the problem. Now, quantitative reasoning, a lot of people have this misconception that, oh, if I'm bad at maths, then I won't be able to do these questions. However, in reality, that is not the case. Okay, because the maths is very basic. Remember, year 8, year 9 level for those topics: percentage, decimals, fractions, rates, and ratios. Okay, now these topics only require the basics operations: add, subtract, okay, and then multiply and divide. You won't be required to do other things like indices, square roots, differentiation, integration. Okay, those types of worded questions are much harder and it's not tested in the UCAT. So the calculator that you get is literally only has these 4 operations: plus, minus, multiply, and divide. Okay, so that means that anything that's given in the premise will tell you to either add, subtract, multiply, or divide. But it won't tell you very, straightforward way. It won't just, the questions won't be, what is 3 plus 2? No. the questions are all worded questions. Okay, and which language do we use for these words? It's actually the English language. So you have to change from a mindset of, oh, the maths is very hard, to a mindset of, actually, it's the English that is hard. Okay, because it is the English that represents the mathematics inside the question. So when you're reading something in English, if you are missing that keyword in English that tells you how to do the question, then you won't be able to do the question unless if you keep reading over and over again until you find those keywords. Okay, so these keywords are different from the keywords in verbal reasoning. Okay, verbal reasoning was understanding a research article. So the keywords was the verbs, adjectives, prepositions, and the main subject. But this time here, those aren't your keywords anymore. Okay, so what are your keywords in English? They're actually the words that tell you when you have to add, subtract, multiply, or divide. Okay, so let's take a look down here, and you take a read of all of the information in the premise and process it in a single read through. So when it says, the graph shows the responses of a group of survey participants when asked what sources they use to get their news, is there any information there that tells me I have to add, subtract, multiply, or divide? And the answer is no. Okay, there's no mathematics in that premise, but you still have to read it to understand what is going on. But it's a quick glance because there is no maths that represents these four operations. Okay, now whenever you're given a diagram, the people often skip it, and that is very, very detrimental because they don't understand the information that's given to them. Okay, so for every diagram, the few things that you have to take note of are the title, the label, and the units. Okay, so here the title just says news sources. Okay, so nothing strange there, no mathematics there. Okay, the labels you can see newspaper, radio, television, social media, and other. So other encompasses the things which are not these four groups. And then lastly, and sometimes the most important, okay, and a source of error for many people is they neglect the units. So in this case here, your units is 230 watt. Okay, now you have to read the context beforehand. So from the text before, we know that this 230 represents the number of people. Okay, so there's 230 people, select other as their news source. Okay, here, newspaper, 360 people selected, has newspaper as their source of news. Okay, now this might sound very trivial, very easy, but it is really where a lot of people make their mistakes, when they underestimate the diagram and they don't truly soak in and absorb what this information is about. Now, the most important part a lot of the times is the question itself. Okay, because in the question, you have to extract your equation that you'll be typing into the calculator. Okay, now remember, you always have to be wary of the important words that give you add, subtract, multiply, or divide. Okay, so here we go. The researcher predicted that 60% of radio listeners and 70% of social media users have been exposed to false information. Was there any information in there that told me I had to multiply, add, subtract, divide? And the answer is yes. What were those words? Of course, I'm familiar with these words, and if you are not familiar with these words, you have to get yourself familiar with these words. Otherwise, you'll always be skipping on things and missing out on important bits of information. Okay, the word of, especially when it's after a percentage, will mean multiply. Okay, so what is 60% of, let's say, $20? Oh, that's 60% times $20. Okay, so this is actually a keyword in English, which tells me I need to multiply. So straight away, when I'm reading this sentence, I see the word a percentage of, and straight away, I realize I need to multiply. Okay, now, don't continue reading the rest of the question, okay, otherwise you're going to forget what this multiply actually means. You need to flesh out this operation by understanding, well, you know, what goes in this equation. Okay, I've got multiply here because of the word of. Now you start extracting the words around that keyword of to put it into a mathematical expression. So it says 60% of, so that's 60% of is times what? The radio listeners. Okay, so times the radio listeners. So that will be part of your mathematical expression. Okay, radio's listeners itself, you know, means nothing in a worded text, but here we have a graph, a passage, and here I know that radio listeners represents the number 450 from my diagram there. Okay, so this is connected to that 450 we have here. So it's 60% times 450. There we go. So 60% of radio listeners is just 60% times 450. Okay, and is another keyword. And what does and mean? And usually means addition. Okay, so and add 70% of, so again, it's the same things we did before, 70% of, so I realize I need to multiply here because of the of, social media. So where is social media users? That's this number here, which is 500. Okay, so that's it. I've only read up to here and I already have a huge chunk in my mathematical equation. Definitely you will use this in order to find the answer because this is literally part of the question. Okay, so you have to be able to extract the mathematical expressions in a single read through as you are reading. Okay, if you just read through it very quickly, you skip through it, and then you didn't absorb this mathematical expression the first time you read it, you won't be able to actually recall the information very well, and you might have to read through things more than once, which will slow you down. So even though you might be very good, very quick, and do this question under 40 seconds, are you doing it as quick as possible? Are you doing it in a single read through? Okay, so I've read up to here, and this is what I have as a mathematical expression so far. So continue on. Okay, have been exposed to false information. So this represents the number of people exposed into false information. Okay, so I'll just write false information here. So this is what goes on in my head. I know false information is this number here. Okay, now this number was a 20% decrease from the previous survey. Okay, 20% decrease from the previous survey. So in my head, I know that in the previous survey, okay, so here I write P for the previous survey and C for the current survey. So the previous survey, you know, was 100%, okay, and this number was a 20% decrease. The word decrease means I have to subtract. Okay, so I have to subtract by 20%. And since it's in percentages, I subtract 20% from 100% to find out that this number represents 80%, okay, of the current number. Okay, so previously it was 100%, currently it is 80%. Okay, how many people from the previous survey were predicted to have been exposed to false information? Okay, so there's a few numbers I have to play with. I need to find out how many people in the current survey was exposed to false information. So I just need to complete this and solve this equation. Just plug it into the calculator and find the answer. Okay, so the answer is, okay, 60% of 450 is 270. 70% of 350 is 500 is 350. add them together, and you get a number of 620. Okay, so this 620 represents the false information in the current survey. Okay, 620. Now, how do I find out the number of people in the previous survey? Now, there's a few ways you can do this. Okay, now we can see here that I have used ratios to represent the information. So you can use ratios to find the number. Okay, but ratios is just another way to multiply and divide. Okay, so here I've got a percentage as well, and percentages require a lot of multiplication and division as well. Okay, so I know my mathematical operation will need to use these two numbers, 620 and 80%, to somehow get a number for the previous number of false information. Okay, and this number will have to be bigger than 620. So what operation do I use in order to get a number larger than 620 that involves percentages? So with percentages, you always have to multiply and divide. Okay, so to get a bigger number using 620 and 80%, I have to divide. Okay, so how do I divide a percentage with a number? Remember, you have to convert it. So you can just go 620 divided by 0.8 in your calculator. Just like how above, you should have converted these into decimals. And then you get a larger number, 775. And this is the number of people that are in this current survey. Okay, and that's literally how you do the question. How fast was that? All I had to do was I read that first line and I come up with this line equation. I work it out to be 620. It's a 20% decrease, which gives me 80% for the current year. So to find the previous year, I just grab these two numbers, get a larger number by dividing, and that's it. Okay, so yes, you might have completed this within 40 seconds. Okay, but if you knew what you were doing by just extracting all the information in a single read through, okay, you could have done this question in probably 20 seconds. Okay, so that's the power of actually being able to get the mathematical equation in a single read. And that is the mindset you must have in order to do these questions. Okay, now, how are you supposed to fix yourself if you are reading through a passage more than once? Okay, when you look through the solutions, do not just go, yeah, it's oh yeah, that's how you get the answer. I needed to get 620 divided by 0.8 and then done. No. Okay, because a lot of the solutions out there, they just tell you how to get the solution. You have to take it one step back, okay, and go, well, how did the solutions know I had to multiply, divide, add or subtract? What was the word in English that I needed to understand that told me I needed to add, subtract, multiply, and divide? So that's when you start building up on your logical reasoning, grabbing the English and realizing, hey, this is the part that I need to translate into mathematics. This is the part that I'm not understanding. Okay, like this translation is actually what is slowing me down. Not the equation itself. Punching things into a calculator is easy. It's getting the equation from the English that is difficult. Okay, so what ends up happening is you end up building a glossary in English that tells you, whenever you see this word, it will be add. Whenever you see that word, okay, it will be multiply. Okay, so that whenever you're reading something in English in the future, you're not just thinking, what's going on here? You're thinking, okay, what are the keywords in English that are giving me a mathematical operation? Because this will give me a lot of information to write my mathematical equation. Okay, so you have to change the way that you read so that you are reading the mathematics as you are reading the English. And this is the key to actually improving. So if you've missed any of these words in your first read through, okay, I highly suggest that you throw these into a glossary so that you never miss them in the future ever again. You see the word of, after a percentage and you realize straight away I need to multiply. And that way in future questions you will not hesitate and you will not waste time or get the question wrong. Okay, so hopefully this has helped you kickstart your quantitative reasoning preparation. Now, as always, this is only just a small portion of all the techniques that we have. But if you do like this video, be sure to check us out in future videos as we go through more techniques and strategies to help you with any UCAT question. I'll see you all next time.